Welcome to the Growth Ventures podcast, the go-to platform for entrepreneurs, innovators, and changemakers. I'm your host, Hamlet Azarian. In this podcast, we delve into the world of business, technology, and innovation. We bring you conversations with industry leaders, disruptors, and visionaries who are shaping the future and making a difference. So whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a curious listener, join us on the journey of learning and growth. Welcome to the Growth Ventures podcast. And now, let's delve into today's episode. Welcome back to the Growth Ventures podcast, where we delve into the dynamic realms of business, technology, and innovation. I'm your host, Hamlet Azarian. Today, we're thrilled to have Nardo Monaloto with us, a trailblazer in deep technology and healthcare innovation. Nardo's 25-year career spans roles from a director at Kaiser Permanente and senior manager at HealthNet to pivotal positions in numerous startups as a chief product officer and chief technology officer. At the forefront of quantum computing as a general partner at Qubits Ventures, Nardo is reshaping how we view technology and societal impact. He is also reshaping the future of tech entrepreneurs through his mentorship at the Quantum Startup Foundry and Duality Accelerator. In this episode, we'll delve into the intersection of healthcare and emerging technologies, explore the transformative potential of quantum computing, and glean insights from Nardo's illustrious career. Let's get started. Nardo, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really an honor and pleasure to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Hamlet. Looking forward to our conversation.
Of course. So Nardo, before we get started, I think it's really important for our listening audience in general to get a little understanding of what's happening in the world of quantum. I think there was a recent report I read, and I'm sure you're going to correct me on this because I believe it's not as current even to today's investment, that particularly in the U.S. in 2019, it started off like around $225 million in total VC investing. 2020 grew to about 1.35 billion. 2021 went up to 1.8 billion. 2022 similar numbers, and now is it larger? Is that what's going on overall, particularly here in the U.S. in terms of investments from VCs?
Yeah. So the investment that you're talking about, Hamlet, it's really the federal investment, right? So there's the VC investment and there's the federal investment. From a federal investment standpoint, the U.S. had increased to 3.25 billion. I think the U.S. has really realized that quantum technologies is a critical technology that we actually need to get. We actually need to become a master of and really understand the full use of it. It is such a powerful technology that there's so much funding being put into it. There's so much research being put into it across the board. There's so much from research perspective and the university perspective. There's definitely a lot of focus there. I can definitely talk more about that.
Perfect. And then that's just the U.S. and U.S. dwarfs internationally, right? Like I think China is up to 15 or higher now in terms.
Yeah, I think these is, and to be confirmed too, Hamlet, right? So the current stuff that we see out there from their own government spending and investment is 15 billion. But I think we probably know they're much higher just because of how advanced they are in terms of this space. A lot of people are looking at it at around 25 billion.
Wow. That's amazing. And they're clearly the largest player, right? The EU is in the 7 billion-ish. US comes next, and then Japan is probably the fourth and largest in the world. Is that about right?
Yeah, and you can see, there's quite a bit of interest, right? So a lot of definitely the Western world is in it. I think as far as I remember, there are 33 countries right now that have investment in the space. I mean, even for my own country, I come from the Philippines. And even for my own country to have to invest close to 1 billion pesos to create a quantum strategy together goes to show you how important quantum technologies really is.
That's phenomenal. So let's take a little step back. Let's kind of help people understand. So most computers today operate on bits, right? Ones and zeros. And where quantum steps in is it allows you to be kind of in between or both current states. Is that where how do you simplify it to explain to most people why this is so disruptive and why there's so much excitement and investment capital going into it?
Yeah, I think before I get into that piece of it, I'd like people to know what the heck quantum is, right? So quantum, really, if you take a look at it, quantum just really means small particles. That's the definition of that. So, and basically these small particles are particles that we know of, right? So things like atoms is we consider that as a quantum of matter, right? Photons is a quantum of light. So if you chop light into its smallest pieces, you would come up with what we call a photon. Another one is a quantum of electricity is an electron, right? So if you break down electricity in its smallest particle, the electron comes out. And same thing for vibration. So vibration is quantum of vibration. If you chop it down to its smallest particle, it's called a phonon. So that's from a visual standpoint, that's really the way you could easily understand it. And what we're doing is, from a quantum technologies and computing standpoint, is we're using these small particles as a part of quantum sensors, as part of computers, as part of communications and networks and applications. So that's really the base side of it. That in the quantum mechanics, these quantum particles have interesting properties, right? Things like quantum entanglement and also superposition and things like that. It is these special properties that makes quantum really special, right? So, for example, when you're talking about bits and bytes, right? So from a classical perspective, we only have ones and zeros to compute. So it's an on and off switch. So you could represent data in an on and off switch. Quantum is very different because of its superposition capability. So quantum bits or qubits, just like the sound of just like the name of my venture firm here, is really represents ones and zeros and could represent both ones and zeros and anything in between, in between the one and zero. So you can see just based on that capability, you could have two qubits, but it could represent many different compute capabilities.
Wow. So what does that allow? That allows you to process a ton more data a lot faster. Is that kind of a ton more endless possibilities, right? Is that a kind of way of understanding it?
Yeah, the way you need to think about it is like let's take a good case of like in the AI space, right? See, in artificial intelligence, what we're trying to do is solve what we call probabilistic problems, right? So anything that has to do with probabilities. So what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to use classical system, which is ones and zeros, which is deterministic. And we're trying to solve probabilistic issue. And then you try to figure out like, why is it taking so long? Why is it so hard to do that, right? Because the systems don't match, right? The problem. You have a deterministic system trying to solve a probabilistic problem. Quantum systems and quantum computing is all about probabilities. It's a probabilistic system. So if you match a probabilistic system with probabilistic problem, guess what? You'll solve it in a much better way, right? So I would say that's the highest level that I can explain that. A good example would be in drug discovery. There are studies out there where, if you do quantum simulation using classical, it's going to take about 145,000 years to compute, right? So in classical systems. In quantum systems, it's going to take about 3 or 4 days. So I think to me, it's more of like, okay, just because the way quantum solves a problem is very natural towards probabilities, and it solves it in a much faster way, less number of steps, and you get a lot of interesting results.
So we're going to be able to solve problems for like years we haven't even attempted to be solving, right? And when this comes to fruition, like the problem is that we're like, oh, this is unsolvable. Let's not even try to solve this.
Yeah. So quantum is good for what they call NP hard problems, right? So these are like combinatorial problems that's going to take a long, long time for any of our classical systems to compute. But it's good at really, really hard stuff, but it's not good in what I call the simple stuff, the things like things that we do in classical, right? Doing a spreadsheet, doing an email. It's not built for that.
Right. Okay. I love it. So before we get into all of this, thank you for setting a great groundwork. Let's take a step back and talk about your past and what you did. So can you tell me a little bit why you were at Kaiser what your specific role was and what you were doing there.
Yeah, so my background has always been in the healthcare space, right? So I'm computer scientist, done quite a bit of work in the healthcare industries, over 30 plus years in that space. In Kaiser, I was part of a big group in the Technology Innovation Fund. And from there, we funded the companies to basically pilot inside of Kaiser Permanente, learn from that. And depending on how successful it is or not successful, from a success standpoint, we invested in those successful companies. And then from those that are really not suited for scaling up, we basically put together a document of all the lessons learned and in terms of how we could have done things differently, what made it fail, and what we can improve upon. So
So basically, within Kaiser, I just want to make sure I understood this. So it was a group that you guys would have new vendors when you were onboarding into the platform. You would do little small trial runs, and if it was working well, then you would kind of do rollouts and why it's working and invest in that business more. Correct?
You invest in the proof of concept projects to pilot out the technology. But if everything goes well and all the there's a big utility inside of Kaiser, that it scales up, and then from that standpoint, they get the bigger funding and the potential to be in front of the corporate venture arm of Kaiser Permanente.
How big is Kaiser for some people who might not know? And my wife works, by the way, at Kaiser. So full disclosure here, she's a pharmacist at Kaiser. They're in multiple states, right? Are they the largest healthcare provider in the U.S. now? Is that fair to say?
I think I would say they are the largest integrated delivery network, right? So because Kaiser is such a different model, right? So where they integrated clinical care plus the School of Medicine plus pharmacy plus lab plus the insurance side. So it's all integrated into one big package. That's why they are considered a leading edge organization.
Amazing.
Yeah. So in terms of size, as far as I can remember, in terms of employee size, there are the 150 or 165,000 employees. So they are definitely a large organization. But don't quote me on that, just because it's been a while since I've been in Kaiser.
Right. So you were here at Kaiser, and then from there, where did you transition off to? At what point where you're like, okay, I've enjoyed being at Kaiser, but this is not enough. So when did you start looking for your next transition, and when did that process begin?
Yeah. So one thing that I realized in while I was in Kaiser, that my real passion is really emerging tech and applying emerging tech and to solve problems. And Kaiser is it's a great ecosystem. They have a good innovation team. They like to be forward progressing in many of these things. But Kaiser is one organization, and I said, okay, maybe what I need to do is go out of Kaiser, create my own company where I could create an innovation ecosystem for emerging technologies. And that was the first company that I came out of Kaiser. That company is called Catalyze, and that company is still here. And I'm still working from that capacity as well, where we work with investors, startups, and corporations, performing different value-added consulting services for them.
Amazing. So tell us a little bit about what Catalyze does exactly, and what do you enjoy most about that in that role?
Yeah. So Catalyze. So what we do there is we perform services for different the three stakeholders that I just previously mentioned. On the investor side, we do quite a bit of work in the due diligence space, and also helping portfolio companies turn around or grow or just be fractional executives and for some amount of time. On the startup side, think of us as like a virtual accelerator. We only help 2-3 companies a year because we help extensively. We are fractional executives inside of these startup companies where we do take equity positions in them. So that's the others. Out of the three-legged stool, that's the second one. The third one is corporates. So from the corporate standpoint, we do a lot of work in the area of emerging technology strategy and system transition planning, from coming from classical legacy systems, transitioning over to emerging technology systems.
Got it. How do you define emerging technology? Like, what are some of the areas that are most interesting to you guys?
Yeah, I think emerging is really more on technologies that hasn't fully taken its ground inside of the organization itself, right? Because each organization is very different. So when you classify emerging technology, it's like, okay, quantum, there's definitely not a lot of organizations that have gone into quantum yet, right? But if you say, okay, well, if you're doing AI, a lot of organizations are already in there. So for some organization, it may not be emerging, but for others, it's emerging, right? Automation like intelligent robotic process automation type of technologies, we deal with those. In the area of new kinds of virtual data management, smart data fabric related things. So anything that is not inside of the organization from a perspective of really changing their model from both a people, process, technology, services, and all of that is defined emerging technology for that organization.
So it sounds like, at least for corporates, you guys are playing sort of like a fractional CIO, right? Chief Information Officer and your innovation officer, and you guys are coming in and helping them think through how this technology can improve overall their processes, their workflows, and how does it get introduced within the organization?
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. We actually partner with the CIOs, with the CTOs, with the Chief Innovation Officer. I think of us as like their thought partner when it comes to building their strategic roadmap, building their emerging strategy, and how they could basically say, how do we try this, and how do we roadmap it from a short, midterm, and long-term position perspective, and how do we transition out of legacy systems, and so we could divert a lot of our funding and a lot of our resources over to this new emerging tech. So we help, we're part of that partnership with them.
So if I'm a founder listening in today and I want to sell to a large corporate, and I think I have a innovative and I'm in emerging tech pattern, what are some things that as founders should be thinking about? Like, what are some concerns that most corporates it usually like, hey, I get it. Your product is amazing. I understand that it's phenomenal. Of course I want to do this, but hey, I have a whole organization that operates a certain way, and this would be a little bit disruptive. What are some ways that some advice you could give different founders that, hey, these are the ways you should be approaching this, or these are the ways you should be talking about this, so it becomes an easier of something for them to be able to embrace or adopt or take it?
Yeah, I think a lot of startups are not really familiar with enterprise procurement process. So an enterprise procurement process is very, very complicated, right? It's not as easy to get into an enterprise. Just because you have really good technology, a really good product, doesn't mean that you're well suited to that enterprise already, right? So one thing that I always suggest with startups is get familiar with the procurement process, because the procurement process for enterprises, they often have a checklist of things that they need to be in compliance with. So I remember whenever we brought technology company inside of Kaiser Permanente, that checklist is a long checklist. And it is to protect Kaiser, right?
So this is their legal team has already put together sort of a compliance checklist that you as a new partner need to be able to check these boxes off, right?
That's right. Yeah, correct. And it's not just the legal and compliance, folks. There's a lot of stuff, depending on what kind of product that you're trying to bring in, or technology that you're trying to bring in, right? So a good example would be like, okay, well, you're bringing in this new wireless device that's basically measuring, and diagnosing, people from, without any leads or any type of connection, right? From that standpoint, it's like, okay, well, you have to take a look at, are they HIPAA compliant, right? Do any of their data transmission are encrypted? Is it encrypted? Is their technology safe? Is their device safe? Does it interact with other devices? I mean, there's a lot of things that goes on with that checklist. So it's not really if you get to pass that checklist, I can guarantee you go to another enterprise, it'll get easier. It'll be an easier win.
Got it. Okay, that's great advice, and thanks for sharing that. So you're doing this at Catalyze, and when did the idea of Qubits come around? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the idea of having a fund as part of the emerging tech innovation ecosystem has always been there. It has always been a part of the strategy for Catalyze to do something like that. And from a healthcare perspective, I could have done a healthcare fund. It would have been a lot easier for me to have done that, just because of my background and depth in it. But there are definitely a lot of health tech funds out there. I could have done an AI fund just because that's one of my deep expertise in building AI products. But there's also a lot of AI related funds out there, deep tech related funds out there. So it's a very competitive space. So I said, okay, well, what is the best thing that I need to take a look at, right? 4 or 5 years ago, I encountered quantum machine learning, and I took a look at quantum, and I said, holy cow, this is probably the next paradigm shifting kind of technologies that I need to care about. And since I am so passionate about emerging tech and applying it to problem solving, I decided, okay, this is my time to trigger a fund, and that's how Qubits Ventures was born.
Amazing. How large is the fund right now? This is fund one?
Yeah, this is fund one, and we're trying to reach up to 10 million for this fund. But anything in between 5 and 10 would be great enough. We're trying to do our final close for this fund, hopefully pretty soon. And so that's where I'm at. I invest from an investment thesis perspective. I invest broadly across technologies, not just quantum computing, right? A lot of people think, oh, Nardo, you only invest in quantum computing. No, I don't. I invest in quantum applications, which includes things like, simulation, optimization, digital twins, cryptography, AI for quantum, that category. And then quantum systems are things like programming tools, data analytics, networking tools, and then devices. So these are, quantum computers. These are quantum sensors, photonic devices, integrated chips, components. I invest in those as well. And then any technology that I consider bridging the gap between classical and quantum together. So these are like interconnects, hybrid computing, quantum-inspired software, and things like that.
Amazing. So I'm kind of curious, like even on the application side of things in quantum right now, so it sounds like there's different subsections in quantum that is all growing all at the same time. Hardware is where the heavy investments are occurring, right? That we talked about earlier. But all these other subsections, are they able to move the ball forward per se without the hardware being fully available, or how does that work? And how are you able to do due diligence properly on these companies while the hardware race continues to push itself forward and onward, right?
Yeah. So in this kind of world, you have to have a good understanding of the technology stack, right? In terms of what needs to get built in order for applications to actually be useful and have a quantum advantage, right? So the first thing that needs to get built is really the chips and the components, right? So without the chips and the components and all the different sensors and photonics and optics and lasers, those quantum computers are not going to come about. So there's that category. So of course you're going to be heavy in looking at that space first, and then as you continue up the stack and basically say, okay, well, you have to take a look at, okay, well, what about the middleware, the pieces that connects these quantum technology into other things, right? So the interconnects, the photonic interconnects, the technology that can create distributed quantum networks, right? So you're going to have to take a look at those as well. So as you go up the stack, then basically the quantum computer becomes much more useful because it's getting built. Quantum applications are probably, I look at them from a hybrid standpoint, and And the way I think about investing is, we are in a transitional type scenario. It's not just, you cannot do a pure quantum computing, quantum machine learning just running on quantum. You cannot do that right now because it's so error prone. And there's a lot of failures happening from that standpoint, right? But however, in a transitional perspective, you can have hybrid application that has a classical algorithm working with a quantum algorithm. You can combine the results together so you could benefit from both, right? So I would look into investing in those. But so far, a lot of the investment I have are still within the I would say chips, integrated photonic chip, quantum photonic chip, quantum chips and components, sensors, and that space still, just because it's still a maturing process.
And is the current state of the industry predominantly, I'm assuming, pre-revenue at this stage for across the board, right? Most companies, most startups are all pre-revenue at this stage?
Most of them are. There are some startups that are already making revenue. For example, it depends on what they're making. So one of my portfolio companies, in terms of how they're doing their roadmap, their first product off the bat was a quantum photonic testing and measurement system. So it's needed by the quantum industry. So they're already making revenue and year over year, right? So that's a great sign. But the next stage where, the product is going into more of an integrated photonic chip with integrated electronic controls. So that's going to be a little bit more of a longer term approach towards revenue.
Got it. So how, if I'm a founder and I'm in quantum, what are the things I should be thinking about, or if what are some advice you would give them and say, hey, in order to build your business to be sustainable, these are some the 2 or 3 tips you would give them, because obviously it sounds like there's still some time period before we can get to a point where there's significant revenue being generated, unless you're already servicing the industry, right? Did I understand that correctly? Or
yeah, unless you're servicing the quantum industry,
yeah,
so there could be revenue there. So I think there's this misnomer, Hamlet, that you need to be a quantum physicist to start a quantum company. I mean, to me, there are a lot of AI companies that were founded by business people, right? So the key thing is still the same thing still applies to quantum. You have to figure out a problem to solve and solve it in a different way. Quantum is just a technology; it's just a different way. And so that's one tip is like, don't be afraid of it. You can always build the team to include a quantum physicist. There's always, it takes a team to make something happen. It takes a team to get execution to happen really well. So it's all those discipline. The other tip is, if you take a look in the U.S., we have 77 universities that have a quantum information program.
Wow, I had no idea we had that many. That's amazing.
Yeah, we have, and it's growing. It's growing across the globe. It's 181. The U.S. represents the bulk of it, right? So you know what that means? That means there's a lot of IP and patents already inside of these universities that could be harnessed to create companies with. So that's one set, right? So you don't have to build your own IP. You can basically license IP from universities. The other one is NASA, DoD, DOE, any of our federal groups that are working in quantum. These are paid by tax dollars, our own money, right? Tax money. And these technologies are also available for commercialization. So take a look at those. You don't necessarily have to build your own in order for you to create.
Amazing. Is there specific industries that you see perfect for quantum, like crypto technology, security, healthcare? Those seem like large enough, big data, where quantum can be transformative. Is there others that people should be paying attention to?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot. So if you take a look at the broad scope of where AI applies, quantum will basically apply to all of them.
That's amazing. So it's as large as AI, if not potentially even bigger.
Right. And even bigger, mainly because I think the stuff that we haven't really figured out yet is we're only looking at what we call classical use cases, because these are use cases that we know. But quantum is such a different paradigm shifting kind of an approach that, we're probably going to be building something that we haven't encountered before, right? As a good area is in the emerging area of quantum biology. Us humans are quantum beings, right? So we're made out of atoms. And so, what does that mean? What's the implication of that? So I think this area of quantum biology, the intersection of life sciences and what that looks like, I could probably go on and on that one. There's going to be, I would say, a lot of different new things that we've never seen before, new categories of applications, new categories of devices. That's probably going to come out, as we further our research on it.
That's amazing. It sounds like there's a lot of exciting different industries, a lot of new technology that this is going to enable. If you had to estimate where we are today in quantum, how many are we? 10 years out, 5 years out, 15 years out before the technology is? Where are we? I guess. How would you tell most people? This is roughly when I see this being really readily available and almost massively distributed.
Quantum is one of those things that you'll never see, right? But it's actually here. It just depends on which portion of quantum we're talking about, right? So, for example, post-quantum cryptography. So basically, it's a new kind of encryption, right? So it's just a more unhackable way of building encryption. And we're doing a lot of work in the area of NIST in trying to standardize which of these encryption technologies are there. A good example is the Chrome browser. You're probably using it now. So the Chrome browser, I think in the last month or two, had basically implemented PQC as part of their Chrome solution, right? So
that's what the latest update was, where they that's what, I don't know, interesting.
Yeah, so that was the latest update. They basically wanted to create a secure browser. Another one would be if there was an implementation of a quantum random number generation chip integrated inside of a Samsung mobile phone last year, and that was last year. There are another implementation of quantum random number generation chip inside of like a DocuSign. So you could create really good random digital signatures as part of a document. So these are technology that you'll never see, but it just depends on which part of it, right? So these PQC, quantum random number generation, are already here. The ones that are harder are things like, quantum machine learning application that's fully running inside of a quantum computer. That's going to take a little bit of a longer time.
Got it. That's exciting to know. I had no idea it was already here and already introduced some of the products that we use daily basis, right? You just went through talking about Samsung phones as well the Chrome browser. That's really exciting to know that the technology has gotten at least elements of it to the point that it's already being distributed into people's hands every day.
Yeah, and there are also, Hamlet, implementations of like application, right? So, for example, like the Port of LA, where we had issues with the whole logistics and truck delivery issues we had there, that was solved by a quantum machine learning algorithm.
Amazing. So I know earlier you mentioned, I'm going to take a step back. You said that you guys at Catalyze work with at most three different startups. And if there's a startup that's listening in and they want to kind of partner with you or potentially become considered as part of a company that would be part of your accelerator, what is their way of, is there an application process, or what do they need to do in order to be considered to be a startup that you guys would want to partner with? Can you
Yeah, sure. There's no specific application form. It really requires a conversation, right? Because we have to be really selective about companies that we work with, mainly because we are taking our time, right? We are providing our time and expertise and making sure that there is a long, I would say a short and long-term benefit for working with them, even from a Qubits Ventures perspective, right? So, for example, they could, they could just contact me, and we'll go through a process of conversation and say, okay, well, what do you guys need? What do you guys do? What are you trying to solve, right? So we just basically do an assessment of the company, have the conversation in terms of what kind of gaps in the skill set, experience they're looking for in order for them to be successful. And then from there, we'll make an assessment whether this is the right candidate company for us. And typically, a big part of it is at the end of the day, they need to, once we're done working with them, they need to be one of those investable type companies.
Got it. So what are you looking for specifically? Like what really makes one startup stand out more than the other if you had to kind of evaluate? Like you had 100 startups to look at, you only have room for 3, right, in the program per se. What are the elements of that decision process that you guys look at and you're like, this is a startup that makes sense? It sounds like there's the team mix, the problem that they're trying to solve. You mentioned a couple of those too. Is there anything else outside of those things that people should be, so you get, the right applications of startups, or they present themselves properly so they can highlight what they've been working on and so on and so forth?
Yeah. So to me, the one that I really care about is, the team. I need to see the alignment of the team, the complementary skills, and, what they've done, the depth of the team, the experience and all that stuff, right? The problem that they're solving, of course, the market space, but that space normally changes. It depends on what they're trying to do. The other is really, I'd like to see early signs of execution. Is this a team that can execute, right? So it's not just a team that's like, okay, they're good on paper, but in terms of executing on the technology and the science of it, they just need to show like, oh, here are the traction, here are the publications we made, here are the patents that we have created, here's a prototype of something that we've done, and these are the few things that we've solved. So a history of like, minor execution points that they've done. And I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for, okay, do they actually have the chops to make this happen? Because in the area of quantum, it's very, very hard, right? So the team and then some level of execution that we could see, and whether we could see them coachable enough so they could listen to us, and so we could work it together. So that's how I know the assess.
Amazing. Is there a few Qubit Venture portfolio companies that you've been proud of and impressed of since you guys have invested, that made impressive progress so far?
Yeah. So that company I told you that is already generating revenue called Nix Lab. So they're an Indonesian startup that has a U.S.-based presence, and they, if I recall, they have 60 or 70 customers already.
Wow.
And these are repeat customers. Their revenue is increasing year over year. So, which is that's for their first product. Their second product is already built from a prototype perspective, right? So now, so this kind of startup is, from a markup standpoint, have increased significantly since I've invested in them. One recent one that I invested in is a Caltech spinoff. And they're in the what I call universal laser, right? Universal miniaturized laser that you could tune. It's also tunable. So there's the kind of technology that I would say that's 2-3 years ahead of where the industry's at. So very, very excited about that one. And then another one out of University of Virginia. Called QC82. They're building a room temperature photonics-based quantum computer. And their first product coming off the gate next year is a dual photonics detector. So what I normally also look at in a company is I'd like to see roadmap that also has a revenue capability in short-term, mid-term, and long-term.
Got it. Your early stage, your pre-seed and seed, right? Is that kind of when you guys step in and typically invest?
Yeah, pre-seed and seed, correct.
And typical check size is roughly how big? Like
$100K to $500K.
Do you guys lead, or are you guys have you guys led any rounds, or are you?
Yeah, we could do both, just because of the strategic nature of the fund. So we've been asked to lead because of the specialization.
Phenomenal. Well, it sounds like the right type of startups. You guys all heard. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you? Would it be LinkedIn or to reach out, or what's?
Yeah, LinkedIn would be great. So I think you could reach me by just search me for my name. My name is quite unique, so I'd probably show up first if you look up my name, Nardo Monaloto. And then also via email, nardo@qubitsventures.com.
Perfect. We'll make sure we have that in the show notes. Nardo, thank you so much for coming on today. This wraps up our insightful discussion with Nardo Monaloto, his experience and perspectives that shed valuable light on the evolving landscapes of healthcare innovation and quantum technology. As we navigate the ever-changing world of technology and entrepreneurship, conversations like these keep us informed and inspired. A huge thanks to Nardo. Nardo, thanks again for coming in today and sharing your journey and insights with us. Thank you for our listeners for joining in and listening to the Growth Ventures podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and subscribe for more conversations with industry leaders and visionaries. I'm Hamlet Azarian, your host of the Growth Ventures podcast. Until next time, keep innovating and exploring the new horizons in technology and business.